Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bold Strokes Books Bookathon. Apologies for the darkness that has descended in upstate New York. Our lights in here are terrible. Thank you so much if you've joined us for the last few panels. It's been such a great event so far. Up next, we have author readings from Kris Bryant and D. Leigh. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about the book they're reading from, and start their readings. Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Kris Bryant. Today I'm going to be reading from my book, Lucky. And Lucky is about a woman who wins the lottery. She's she's in her 20s, her late 20s, and she's pretty much had a kind of a miserable life growing up. And now she lives paycheck to paycheck, and so she wins the lottery. And a couple of weeks ago, I read the first chapter when Sally Ann had a get-together online for all different things. I read the first chapter where I introduced Serena Evans to the world, and so tonight I was going to read from the second chapter, and it's, I don't know if we're going to just start reading. Dee, what do you think? Should we just start reading, or do you want to talk about your book too, or how are we going to do this? She missed all of that. Do you want to introduce yourself and your book, or how do you want to do this?
You go ahead and read, and then I had to run and go get a copy of my book so I could show the cover. You go ahead and read, and then I'll introduce mine before I read.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so the first chapter, like I said, was Serena Evans. You just kind of get introduced to her. You just see that she's kind of had bad luck in her life. And so the second chapter is all about the love interest, Gabrielle Barnes. There's chapter 2 from Lucky. You've worked hard for this. You're hungry. It's yours. Take it. Gabrielle Barnes leaned closer to the mirror, gripped the sides of the porcelain sink with both hands, and stared at herself. The charcoal gray suit and cream-colored blouse were conservative, but still very feminine. She tilted her head to the left, then to the right, to ensure her makeup and French twists were perfect and professional. She hid behind glasses most days, but she opted for her contacts because today was going to be life-changing. Her amber eyes were the best feature, and she was going to show them off. She needed to look and feel successful. Today the board was going to discuss partnership at Ernest & Max Architecture. Gabrielle had been with the firm for 10 years and worked harder and longer than anyone else. She was the first one in the office, and more often than not, was the last to leave. A 60-hour work week was normal for her. She was also the only female architect in a sea of conservative men whose jokes she was never privy to, nor their praise. Gabrielle didn't care. She was in it for a career, not a fraternity. 33 years old with a promising career and no baggage, the latter only because she had no social life. Taking a final deep breath and squaring her shoulders, she lifted her chin, collected her water bottle and iPad, and walked out of the bathroom. The meeting was in 5 minutes, but Gabrielle wanted to get there before it started. Are you ready? Tom Gerhardt, an architect who was hired the same day she was, surprised her in the hallway. Their shoulders brushed as they headed to the conference room. Ready as you are. The relationship was light, almost friendly, but there was always a competitiveness brimming just below the surface. They were both very aware of each other's successes and failures. Gabrielle thought her list of successes outweighed his, but wasn't going to be childish and actually pull out a list to share. She would be at the meeting if there were any. She wouldn't be at the meeting if there was any doubt. Her only issue was that she was at the mercy of the firm's board of directors to decide if she was better fit than Tom to make partner. Looks like they called in the big guns. Tom's voice was low enough for only Gabrielle to hear as they marched into the conference room and immediately split apart. Tom sat on the edge closest to the owner, while Gabrielle preferred to have her back to the large floor-to-ceiling windows. She carefully placed her iPad on the table in front of the open-back chair next to her immediate boss, Christopher. He gave her a brief smile when she sat down, but immediately turned his attention to his iPad. Not a good sign, Gabrielle thought, but wasn't going to let his impersonal gesture derail her. Lawrence Anderson, board director, stood and pulled up the hem of his single-breasted suit jacket, bringing all eyes to his stomach, which rounded out and strained against the oversized black button. Let's get started. We've invited Gabrielle and Tom to the board meeting because with John's retirement at the end of the year, we will have an open seat in January. If Lawrence were to stoop down 2 inches, his girth would rest on the top of the conference room table. Standing a mere 5 foot 2 inches tall, wearing shoe lifts, Lawrence seemed almost as wide as he was tall. At 5 foot 7 and also in heels, Gabrielle towered over him. She hated when the men in the office teased Lawrence behind his back. She respected him too much to partake, but also didn't stop it. He was a powerful man at the firm, and she appreciated his hard work of growing the company as much as he had over the last 30 years. Still, it was hard not to wince at his struggles with his ill-fitted clothing. While a decision hasn't officially been made yet because both candidates are equally qualified, we're going to evaluate you both over the next 6 months on projects that come in. Tom, we've decided to give you the lead on the new Lexington Hotel and Conference Center in Aurora. Gabrielle, we want you to step in and finish Aaron's project. You'll also get the next large project that comes up. Gabrielle kept her shoulders squared, even though the wind had been knocked out of her sails. Blood pounded in her ears and flushed her neck and cheeks. Once again, she was swooping in to clean up a massive mess. She always told herself that she had the ability to salvage a hot mess was job security, but just once she wanted a large project from start to finish. They always gave her the smaller gas stations and new pharmacies to design, but most of them were chains and the designs were pretty standard. Gabrielle wanted a complete design control. Thank you, she said. She couldn't look directly at Tom. Her peripheral vision picked up his giant grin and the handshake he shared with one of the partners. She folded her hands in front of her and waited for the meeting to be called. Sexism and favoritism were still alive and kicking at Ernest and Max. As much as Gabrielle wanted to scream and throw shit, she remained calm and collected. When the meeting adjourned, 20 painfully sluggish minutes later, she slowly stood, trying not to draw attention to herself, and quietly left the room, and nodding at those who dared to make eye contact with her. Everyone else stayed behind to talk about their weekends or lofty investments. They were so smart to snatch up when they did. Gabrielle wasn't a part of their camaraderie, nor was she going to share her financial successes. Although her skin had toughened over the years, it still stung being left out of jovial banter she heard all the way down to the hall to her office. Gabrielle, Chad called twice while you were in your meeting. Sounds important. If her assistant wasn't so damn good at his job, Gabrielle would have fired him a long time ago. He was irritating in a way that wasn't legally terminable, but Miles consistently danced on her last nerve with his peculiar quirks. After the third gum pop and the 10 seconds it took to hand Gabrielle her messages, Gabrielle snapped. Don't make me ban gum chewing. It's meant to be enjoyed, not heard by everyone in the office. She turned on her heel and marched into her office, closing her door with more force than she intended. She winced at the noise, but was far too irritated at this day to open it and apologize to Miles. She plopped in her chair and sighed with defeat. An uphill battle. That was the best way to describe her career at Ernest and Max. The ridiculous challenge that was given to her after handing Tom the best project the firm had seen in years made her want to throw something. She picked up a paperweight in her left hand and threw it at the couch. It bounced off the cushions and rolled to a stop on the rug in front of her desk. The barely audible whoosh did nothing to improve her mood. She needed to hear the satisfying crash of glass smashing into thousands of pieces, or hear her tires peel against the asphalt as she stomped on the accelerator of her sports coupe. She couldn't stay in the office, but she couldn't leave either. People would speculate that she was pissed about the turn of events and how unfair the partners were to her. She had to remain calm and cool and stay put. If she thought they were watching her before, now she was definitely under their scrutiny. She was trapped. She did the only thing she could think of to escape. She called her best friend. I'm going to play the lottery and win the jackpot Wednesday, Gabrielle said as soon as Rosie picked up. As long as you take care of me, I'm in for it. Gabrielle smiled at how quickly Rosie jumped in their fantasy. I'm having a shitty day. Tell me good things, Gabrielle said. Well, I love you and Muppet loves you and so does Kitty Purrs. As a matter of fact, Kitty Purrs wants to talk to you. Gabrielle heard a thump and a loud rumble before Rosie yelped and then giggled. Sorry, I dropped the phone. Kitty Purrs was a little too excited to talk and swiped the phone out of my grasp. As much as I dislike animals, yours are probably the only ones I will tolerate. Why was your day so S-H-I-T-T-Y? Gabrielle laughed at Rosie's decision to spell. Let me guess, Care Bear is right there. Rosie's precocious 3-year-old had a remarkable ability to understand and follow adult conversations. 10-4, good buddy, talk to me. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'll let G. Jackson take over from here.
Okay. My next book coming up is, well, this is already out. Ordinary is Perfect. And it is been selling very well. It's the first book that I published with Bold Strokes Books that does not have horses in it, which is sort of my trademark. But it does have a dog named Elvis, and I'm going to read edited for shortening a scene where the two main characters are Catherine Day and an Autumn Swan. Autumn's cousin, Becky, is Catherine's next door neighbor. She dies suddenly and leaves behind an 11-year-old daughter, Gabriella, who likes to go by Gabe. And they find themselves in a situation that Autumn hasn't seen her cousin in 10 or 12 years. And her cousin has left a will. They've gone to the lawyer's office for the reading of the will, and the lawyer, the will has left the two of them, the neighbor Catherine and Autumn, as the co-guardians of this 11-year-old that has this really super high IQ, and they don't even know each other. And all of a sudden, they're co-parenting. They're going to be co-parenting, and they're very different people. So this is a scene from the reading of the will. Autumn regarded Catherine. She wasn't unattractive, just, well, plain. Her khaki pants were neatly ironed, and the sleeves of her white dress shirt were rolled up to contrast against her tanned forearms. Her eyes were the same unreadable shade of brown as her hair, and unremarkable shade of brown as her hair, which was held back by a tie at her nape. Yep, plain, like the black coffee and multigrain muffin that Catherine had ordered for breakfast. So who do I live with? Gabe's irritated demand jerked Autumn from her usual internal conversation. Gabe focused a fierce scowl on Gaylord. That's the attorney. The kid could be scary. For some reason, that made Autumn want to smile. I'm getting to that, young lady. Gaylord put down the will and took off his glasses. Becky met with Janice and myself to set up a legal arrangement for Catherine and Autumn to assume joint guardianship of you. Janice, the social worker, came around the table to place a single sheet of paper and a pen before Catherine, and then Autumn. The guardianship is not legally binding until you two sign those papers, attesting that you will share responsibility of Gabe's welfare for 1 year, at which time the relationship and Miss Gabriella Swan's welfare will be evaluated to make sure everything is working out. If everything's fine, then you'll both sign papers to make the arrangement permanent until Gabe is 21. Catherine picked up her paper and extracted a pair of reading glasses from her shirt pocket. I'm a legal adult at 18, Gabe said, crossing her arms over her chest. Gaylord squinted at her. Yes, you are, but you won't inherit your trust until you're 21. You'd do well not to piss these two ladies off while they're still approving your expenses. Gabe didn't answer, but she reached up to grasp Elvis's harness in a white-knuckle grip. A minute ticked by, then another. Catherine put her paper back on the table and removed her glasses. Could you give Gabe, Autumn, and me a few minutes to talk privately? The thought of Catherine's private sit-down made Autumn queasy. She wasn't good at one-on-one, and this felt an awful lot like two-on-one, since she was the only stranger in the room. The click of the door closing as the others left sounded like a gunshot in her mind. She looked up to 3 pairs of eyes staring at her. Catherine studied Autumn. Damn, she was cute. That was the problem. Becky said her cousin was 25, but very mature for her years, a survivor, independent, a self-starter, a successful entrepreneur. But Catherine didn't see the businesswoman she'd expected. She saw a millennial with multiple ear piercings, and she didn't want to know where there might be other piercings, and at least 3 tattoos she could spot peeking out from under her clothing. Her light brown hair was cut short in one of those purposefully messy, spiky styles, and tipped with blonde highlights. Autumn's fingernails were freshly painted in a stylish red to contrast with her tunic, knotted over one dark gray legging-covered hip, and her black ankle boots looked like something an elf would wear. Was she even wearing a bra? Only the strap of a black racerback undershirt showed over the bare shoulder. Altogether, it didn't seem to Catherine like appropriate attire at the reading of a will. Sure, her face was strikingly pretty, and her eyes were that same mesmerizing hazel that Becky's and Gabe's, but she looked young, too young to be in charge of a super smart preteen on the cusp of the dangerous puberty years. How good of an influence would she be on Gabe? How well did Becky really know the cousin who'd been gone since they were preteens? She let her eyes travel over Autumn's slim frame, then drift up to intelligent eyes that challenged hers. Catherine's face heated. She was embarrassed to have been caught looking. Autumn opened her mouth, then closed it. What were you going to say? Catherine's defenses rose. She didn't need some fancy city woman showing up and reminding her how lacking she was. Autumn glanced at Gabe and shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nothing. It must be something. Go ahead. Autumn glared at her. Nothing appropriate in front of Gabe. Gabe's expression darkened. Anything you can say to me can be said in front of Gabe. Fine. I was about to say, Autumn pushed her chair back and stood close enough that Catherine had to look up from her seated position. Really? Were you just cruising me? No. She leaned back in her chair to create some space between them. The shards of forest green shooting through Autumn's light brown irises were igniting sparks in Catherine's belly. I was conducting advanced reconnaissance. And what did you deduce? That I'm too young to supervise Gabe? To make sure she doesn't become a self-involved mall rat like so many city teens? Gabe had gone quiet. Her head was turning like a spectator at a tennis match as she watched the exchange. Catherine couldn't say what she was actually thinking, that she was stupid to think somebody like Autumn would entertain a one-nighter with somebody like Catherine. Hell, it wasn't like she would do that anyway, even if Autumn was interested. She had too much pride and was too mature for such nonsense. Catherine scowled. Christ, when did she get so off track? This isn't about you or me, Catherine said. We're here to talk about Gabe's future. That's where you're wrong, Mrs. Day. Apparently Gabe's future is dependent on who you and I are. Becky and I both had biological parents completely ill-equipped to rear children. I intend to do everything in my power to make sure my niece never finds herself in those same circumstances. This young, hip millennial had morphed into the fire-breathing, take-no-prisoners CEO of her own company. Maybe she'd misjudged Autumn. Then we're in agreement. Catherine pushed her chair back too and stood, noting with satisfaction that Autumn had to look up now because Catherine was several inches taller. You've answered my concern. Autumn put her hands on her hips, which was how committed you are to Gabe. She moved around Autumn, but stopped at the door. Are you ready to sign some papers? And so starts the story. So, looks like we have some questions here, Kris.
Okay, so what are you working on now, Dee? That's one question. What are we both working on?
I like this question. Kris, when can you expect another Brit writer book? Yes, I want to know that too.
Well, I kind of told Sandy that was my next book. I have Scent is due here in the next couple, 3-4 weeks. And then after that, I'm going to do a full-length Brit writer book, erotica. And I mentioned this before somewhere, where it's going to be pre, during, and post Shameless, but it's going to be from the judge's point of view. So a little bit different, but yeah, so we'll see. I'll try to get that done and have it out probably next year, June, about June, I think.
And what do you have coming up next?
Well, Lucky comes out June 1st. And then after that, I wrote this Thanksgiving novella, but I think it turned into a novel. So just waiting to see what I need to stretch, or if I need to stretch it at all. It's a book called Home, and it's actually really cute. And I wish I had a copy of the cover, but I don't. So I don't have this great cover reveal during this, but it's a really cute cover, and it's a story about home. So from different perspectives, from different people. And it's kind of a Thanksgiving seasonal story. You know, I did Tinsel last year, or this past year I did Tinsel about a cat. And so Home is a Thanksgiving story kind of about a dog. So that kind of a feel good, fluffy, no angst, low angst love story. Right.
Okay. Well, my next book comes out in August. It's called Blaze of Bluegrass, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's got a lot of angst in it. It touches on a lot of issues. It's set, of course, in Kentucky bluegrass country, and the setting is thoroughbred racing. It touches on the women in the Army. It touches on the ethics of bio engineering of soldiers, of whether or not there's had incredible advancements in prosthesis, digital bionic prosthesis for soldiers that come back missing arms and legs, and what they could possibly equip them with and put them back into combat. And it addresses female soldiers who are not safe in among their own troops, who are assaulted by their own troop members a lot of times, and the military has not dealt well with that. So there's a lot of issues in there, but there's also a love story, and of course there's a whole lot about horse racing, and and I got so involved. I was sort of late on my deadline. I got so involved with the research about Kentucky and horse breeding and the whole thoroughbred stuff, and so much so I fell in love with Kentucky, and even had a vacation plan before this whole pandemic started. I was going to do a little tour. Kentucky's also not only famous for its horse racing, thoroughbred racing, but for bourbon, and specifically bourbon. and so you have a whole bourbon tour, and you can actually go and tour some of the big horse farms like Calumet, and some of the very famous farms and stuff. So I had this whole tour planned out to go, and I guess it's going to be put off a year. But anyway, Blades of Bluegrass. I'm very excited about it. It comes out in August. After that, I've signed a contract. I don't have a cover for Writing Lessons, an erotic romance. So.
I like it. Let's see. I have a question here. Kris, what kind of struggles did you have writing in the third person? Let me tell you something. Like I have really fought third person. It's funny. We always joke, Ashley and I, my editor, we always joke about Jolt. When I turned Jolton, it was first person, it was third person, it was first person past, it was first person present, it was third person everything. It was all over the place. And I just really struggled with third person. And so Ashley suggested I switch to first. And so I did, and I really liked it. And I've been writing it like for 10 books. And Melissa Braden's been really, you know, very, very encouraging for me to write third person. And so I finally said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. It was a struggle. I really struggled with it. It took me the full 6 months to write because it's not anything I'm familiar with. So, you know, I'd switch into first. I'd go into first without even realizing it. And then when I was done with it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I never want to write this again, ever. And Ashley, you know, she got back with me and she's like, you will always write in third person. This is great. You should always write in third person. I'm like, I can't do it. So then I write home and it's in third person. So it's like, I kind of have this love-hate relationship with third person now. It's like I fought it for so long, and yet, you know, Lucky's third, and now Home is also in third. But Scent is in first because it's part of the Sensory series. So now I'm trying to trip myself back into writing in first person.
Okay, I think they're wrapping us up.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm back just to kick you off because we got the next one coming up in 2 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you very much for everything.
There's a flash sale on right now for 10% off their books, so please take advantage of that. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, Dee. Bye, Sandy. Bye, everybody.
Bye.